No great deed has ever been performed physically, but mentally and with the spirit. This comes to us from Cicero, and obviously there's been noble deeds done with the body, saving one's life, putting oneself in harm's way to protect another, things of that nature, building houses or for the poor, or, whatever, things of that nature. You get the point. But I think the greater point here and what we need to see is that how the needle of society gets pushed is not through the body, but through the mind. I don't know what the average, um, caveman or early Homo sapien looks like, but I can assume that they were in better physical shape than us, even with the gyms that we have and the diets and the training and those things. I can assume that their bodies were, they were more in shape than us. And society, the human has evolved in such a way because that is not advantageous to pushing society forward. We would still be barbarians if there wasn't, idle time for the great thinkers, for the philosophers, for the scientists, for the intellectuals, for the academics. If there was not enough leisure time, if there was not enough of these people devoting time to the mind instead of the body and the things that the body can obtain, then we would not have a lot of the benefits that the modern age provides us. And my whole point is that I think we need to, if you're watching this, you probably devote at least some time to your, spiritual, mental, intellectual existence. But I think many people don't. And many people are missing out on their potential greatest asset to help society, their potentially best way to push the needle forward, to make life better, to do great things. And I read that quote by Cicero a while ago and I thought about it a lot. And I'm currently reading In Praise of Idleness by Bertrand Russell. And it's talking about, it's praising idleness, praising how in this modern day and age, a long time ago, we could have taken the modern 8-hour workday and made it 4 hours and given more idleness out and given more time for people to enjoy idleness and not just work their lives away. And he speaks on how people think they wouldn't have enough time, or they'd have too much time in the day if they only worked 4 hours. What would they do with the rest of their 20 hours, or, if you minus, the 8 you'll get for sleep, what are you going to do with 12 hours a day? And I think this is a fault of men, especially the modern man, for not being able to think of great ways to use 12 hours, to think of the intellectual fields you could push while, sustaining the physical body, doing physical labor or whatever it may be, but how much you could improve your mind, how much you can improve your soul, your spirit, and even your body for, the average person the average blue collar worker in this day and age isn't even in shape. They're out of shape, and it may just be because of how much they work. They don't believe that they have time to cook correctly. They just eat lunch at some random fast food place every day, and they pick up breakfast at some random fast food place every day, and they don't prioritize eating because they're working so much. So They just eat something to fuel them up to produce more work, but the food that they're eating is actually inhibiting them to produce more work. And it's only easier in the time it takes to prepare and the time it takes to decide what to eat. And they don't have enough time to truly work on their bodies. Their work is physical, but they don't go to the gym, they don't eat properly, they don't run, they don't get enough steps in, all those things. And it's truly a sad fault of men to not think that we need to work to spend a day wisely. Now, I noticed this in myself with my old job. It was, I would be bored and I would not know what to do with my time, and I'd go to work and I'd feel a sense of relief, like, okay, I'm doing something productive. You know, doing I'm helping society, or whatever it may be, but I can't pinpoint the exact reason why I felt better, but I would feel better. And I honestly hated that. That made me sick to my stomach because I didn't want to feel better working a job I didn't like than feeling when I have idle time to use at my whatever I want to do. That just to me felt completely backwards. And it didn't feel like it was a fault of idleness. I didn't feel like it was a fault of society. I felt like it was a fault that I had, a fault that I, for some reason, thought and felt as if going to a job I didn't want to go to, doing work I didn't want to do, for a time from in a time period I didn't want to do it in, for a duration I had no choice over, was a better use of my time than being completely free, idle if I chose, or doing, you know, intellectual work, you know, working my brain instead of my body and attempting to push the needle in greater ways than one's body ever could. So I felt that and I took that as a fault in myself, not as in a fault in idleness. And I think that may be the misconception that a lot of people make nowadays. They say the devil lives in idleness. And I ended up quitting that job and I have far more free time than I've ever had before. And I do things that I do have faults now that I didn't have before, just with the nature of more free time. But I don't believe this is a fault of idleness. This is a fault of myself. This is things that were always there, things that were always looming in the shadows, but I just didn't have time to act on them. And it's better, in my opinion, that they are brought to the surface and I can try to deal with them instead of them looming underneath the shadows, always being there, maybe not always being acted upon, but still there, still ready, still waiting, building because they're not being dealt with. So to me, it is better to see those things up front, deal with them, not blame it on idleness, but blame it on myself, take responsibility, and realize that idleness can be beautiful and one of the best fruits of life. And I also I think there is a certain type of work when you're working your mind, the intellectual work. It looks like idleness, but it's actually the most important work one can do. Studying philosophy, um, going for long walks, contemplating, building your mind, being able to, sit somewhere for 2 hours and just enjoy life and not have to check your phone, not have to be doing something, not having to be up to date, not caring if so and so texted you back or what so and so is doing. I believe to truly see, it's the mark of a bad man who doesn't know how to use his idle time properly. And that isn't something that should be avoided with more work. That is something that should be, if anything, you should honestly stop try to work as little as possible to deal with that, to deal with the fact that you can't spend an hour alone in a room without working, without feeling worthless, without feeling like you're not productive, because the this is the Western civilization um, truth, that the Protestant work ethic, the you do everything in service to doing something else. Nothing is done in and of itself. It's done for something else. You only eat so you can work more. You only rest so you can work more. You only, do these things in service to producing more work, to getting more money, to spending more money, to all those things. And in this day and age, praises the mindless worker, but I don't see there's no virtue in it. And yes, we do need people working. There's the blue collar people who have their own business who I respect for sure and think that they are doing great deeds to society. But when those people use their work as a crutch to avoid idle time, I think they are doing a great service to society, but they are doing a disservice to themselves. And a little less work would make them better. And I think selfishly they should want that, and then selflessly we should want that for those people who do work hard, who do come to our aid when we need it. And I think the excess of work and the lack of idle time throughout the years has made it harder for people to know how to spend their idle time. Nobody reads, nobody writes, nobody works on their on an intellectual pursuit outside of school. After you graduate, you think my learning is done. But school should really be meant to build the foundations for you to learn the rest of your life, which it does a horrible job of, clearly, but that is what it should be. It shouldn't be, you put in your intuition and you do this thing for 12 years and, maybe four more, and then you're good. 16 years, and then the rest of your life is no more study, no more reading, no more anything, no more pushing the needle intellectually, unless you are, one of the few elites. But I think that's a bad way to think about it, and we could all push the field intellectually. We all should, because it's a great way to spend idle time. Epicurus says that, the philosopher of pleasure says that the pleasureful life is low living and high thinking. Much time in idleness, he says. Much time devoted to leisure. This is what Epicurus preaches. And I think you can lose yourself and, yeah, you may not give in to those bad habits while you're working egregious hours, but it doesn't mean those bad habits are going away. They're just not being indulged upon. And then when you have the free time, they will be. And you'll now have the money to do it. And you'll now not feel so bad about it because you're spending your other time fruitfully. So who cares what you do your free time on, as long as you maintain those fruitful work hours. But truly, the most fruitful hours of our life should be in contemplation, should be in leisure, should be in thinking, should be enjoying loved ones, enjoying friends, and things of that nature. Work, the I think it's very helpful to go back to the Greek origins of words, because you can see, because definitions of words I believe are very important, and definitions, I think our concept of certain definitions are different than the concepts of definitions of the ancients. And I almost believe they have better definitions than us because they're more deep-seated, rooted in human nature. There's like the Greek origin for the word character is like something that you would etch. Like you'd etch, so you etch your character. Your character isn't something that you have, but it's something that you are actively creating. And I think that's a great way to think about character. And then, as I was going to say, the Greek word for, I think, work was not at leisure. And it's just, to me, it's almost like they had a completely 180, they had a 180-degree different view of what work is. To us, work is the thing that we do, and leisure is what we do when we're not working. To them, leisure is the thing that we do, and when we're not at leisure, we're working. I think in the minds of the ancients and the minds of us, our baselines are completely different. The baseline for the Greek is leisure, and the baseline for the modern man in Western civilization is work. And I believe this is backwards, and I believe the Greeks had it right, and it's, they had it right, and it's frankly how it should be. We should view we should view ourselves at a state of leisure. And I think, you know, I'm assuming, I know Bertrand Russell's oldish. I don't know exactly when that book I'm reading, I guess it's a form of essays, but I don't know exactly when that was made, but I could guess around the 1930s, maybe 40s, maybe earlier, maybe a little bit later. But I would guess in that time frame from how he is speaking. And it's a whole different ballgame in this day and age with television, with cell phones, with social media. And I believe with those things, we are never at leisure. I mean, that is leisure in its sense, but there's certain things, it's like drinking salt water when you're dehydrated. It's like if someone looked at you from a distance, they would say, "Oh, he's at leisure. He's getting rehydrated. He's drinking water." But then you get closer, you truly examine what's going on, and you say, "No, no, that's salt water." Yes, salt water is good for you when you're already hydrated. It's high in electrolytes and this, that, and the other. But when you're already dehydrated, you do not need salt water. You need straight water. You need straight hydration, maybe electrolytes, but not salt. And that to me is what the leisure in this day and age is. We are already dehydrated from the amount of work that we are doing so often. And then to put the icing on the cake, we spend our free time drinking salt water. We don't spend our time rehydrating. And I know that almost sounds like you just rehydrate yourself in service to do more work. And in a certain degree, you do, but it makes you better mentally. And the things that hydrate can be good in and of themselves. Reading a good book, you know, contemplating, reflecting, long walks, enjoying sunsets, going to the gym, physical activity, conversations with friends, you know, things of that nature can be good in and of themselves and refresh you to do better work and be more fruitful, as I said, in and of themselves towards high thinking, towards potentially doing great deeds in your free time and pushing the needle academically, intellectually, and truly coming to a place where you can produce great deeds and you can help people immensely in the mental and spiritual life, which I believe is far more important than the temporal physical life. And that is partly my goal with these videos. I believe all the videos I have posted, even though they have not reached the audience I believe that they should, or I wish that they had, I believe that they've helped more people than any other work I've done in my life. And the nature of YouTube is, I guess, they'll be on here for a long time. So I guess, many, many great people, their greatness isn't recognized until after their time or later in years. And, I try to remind myself of that at times. Not that I'm great, but that, you know, maybe all this work I'm putting in, it stays on this platform for, say, you know, as long as I live and after. And maybe it reaches its rights audience at a different time and place. Maybe it reaches its audience later in my life. And the work I'm doing now is beneficial. It doesn't look like it because, I mean, this video will probably get like 20 views. So I hope the 20 people who see it enjoy it. But Who's to say in 10 years it doesn't get 100,000 views for some weird reason? And, who's to say if I keep doing this for a couple of years, I don't get more and more followers and more traction? And then my high thinking life is becoming a great deed because, I mean, the things I talk about have helped me immensely live a better life. And I just want to bring that to other people because for a long time, I did not enjoy my daily existence. And the more crazy thing to me, or the more powerful thing, is the fact that I wasn't even aware because I wasn't aware of the life I could have been living. Now I am so far removed from certain faults that I no longer give into. It's hard to remember those times, and it's hard to remember how fruitful these days are. But as of recently, I thought I could re-implement like social media, and I realized how much worse it makes my life. And I was so far removed from, you know, the the 20-year-old who was on social media that I forgot how it made me feel, and I forgot how life actually kind of, it didn't suck because I didn't know anything better, but how if I went back to it, I would, it's like the allegory of the cave. And that's what I thought about when I read the allegory of the cave. It was like, I've seen the light, I've seen the sun. I know what life can be like. I know how fruitful it can be. I know how enjoyable all of these things can be. I cannot go back to the cave and pretend that there's nothing better, that pretend this is it, that pretend with a little bit more discipline and a little bit more quote unquote hard work, mentally, physically, then I wouldn't have a more fruitful existence. Before I was naive to the fact. So it wasn't like I had a FOMO. But now I have FOMO and I can't go back to that life. I can't go back to that existence. And I know a lot of times I've been told by people that they just don't understand the things that I'm talking about. And I can understand that because I wouldn't have either with how I used to be. And maybe I need to do better on breaking the wall and going back into the cave, as Plato recommends the philosopher king to do, and go into the cave to preach the light. And but also be able to be well acquainted enough to the cave to be able to see in the cave. Not be so blinded from the light that you can't even speak to people in the cave, but not be so blinded by the darkness that you can no longer go into the light. And I definitely struggle with that. Um, but that's kind of when I don't know. I just feel like what I'm doing is a great deed, and the people who don't understand it haven't seen the other side yet, and they don't realize that there's a different life that they could be living, and they don't even realize that they want to live a different life because that's all they know, and they're not that unhappy. They're comparing themselves to others, and they're doing better than so and so, and that is something I try never to do because, I mean, frankly, I'm, in my opinion, doing much better than the people of my age in every category. In the categories that I do not value, I far exceed the people in that category, and that's their sole goal. And when I compare myself to those people, it's it's a bad reminder that I could let off the gas and still be exceptional, but that is not the goal. The goal is to be exceptional compared to what you could be, not mediocre compared to what you could be, but exceptional in the eyes of the world. That's why you cannot compare yourself to others. Do the things you know to be right for you. Do the things you know benefit you. And everyone's different. So just because so and so can do this thing that you cannot do without becoming, angry at yourself and this, that, and the other. I don't believe, I think I think so many people think that we need to be more forgiving with ourselves instead of being more disciplined and not doing the things that our soul yearns at us not to do. Some people are like, oh, you work hard enough. I use work too, also in many different definitions. So I'm sorry about that. I use work as um, working a job you hate, and then also working at leisure time that you love. So I'm sorry for that, but try to use context, I guess, and see the difference. I lost what I was going to say. Sorry. I think I already talked about the fact that we we don't need to be we don't need to be kinder to ourselves. We just need to live up to our ideals more. And yes, be kind. Don't, I try to remind myself. It's been so long since I've harmed somebody, but I harm myself daily with the things that I do that I know I will regret, the things that I, the things that I give into with how I treat myself, and that is what I believe is the true form of self-love. Stopping doing those things that you know you'll beat yourself up for. Instead of asking to be kind to yourself, ask to not give into those things that make you be mean to yourself. And everyone is different, so you know your nature. I think that's why it's so important to know thyself. You know, you know what makes you feel like crap. And just because it doesn't make that person feel like crap doesn't mean that they're wrong, you're wrong, or anything. It just means that that's something that you cannot partake in without not feeling good about yourself. And maybe it's something that they have to partake in without feeling good about themselves. Or if they don't partake in, they feel bad about themselves. And maybe it's nothing that deep. Maybe it's just keeping up with, the keeping up with politics. Maybe that's just put you down a loop of something you don't want to go down. And maybe for them, that's a good refresher and they enjoy it and they want to pursue a life in that. Neither of you are wrong, but both of you need to know what serves you and what diminishes you. And if you struggle with with thinking that you have too much free time and that you spend it poorly, that is not something you shouldn't try to be kind to yourself. You need to learn how to spend your free time better and realize that that is life. That is the best part of life is your leisure, your contemplation, your high thinking, and your great deeds that you can do mentally. Because that's what the human race is. That's the only reason we are the number one on the food chain. That is the only reason. We are not the fastest. We are not the strongest. We are not any we excel in nothing physically compared to beast. Compared to animals, we are not on the top of the food chain in any one physical trait. But mentally, we are on the top of the food chain. And that is why humans are humans, for our mental capacities. So don't act as if you don't need to exercise your mind just because you're not a, academic or a professor or you're going to college or, you're not in school anymore, so you don't need that life. That is what makes you human. Your mind is what makes you human. And your mind is the thing you need to master, the thing you need to work on, the thing you need to grow, and the way that you can help the world out most. And I'm sure there's plenty of great minds that could have done great things, but with drinking too much salt water, with not doing high thinking, they wasted their potential. They wasted potentially life altering, society changing ideas that could have made this world we're living in far better, and they deprived us of their gifts. Do not deprive the world of your gifts. And your gifts, they're not physical, they're mental. Yes, treat the body nice. It is your temple, and we should do everything we can. We should eat healthy. We should work out. We should go for runs. We should do a lot of cardio. We should lift a lot of weights. But if anything, that is to keep the mind clear, the mind fresh as long as possible, and to enjoy life as long as possible, and give ourselves enough time to produce something great mentally.